Have you ever wondered how to find real inner peace in the middle of everyday chaos? How some people seem to move through loss, uncertainty, and disappointment without being destroyed by it, while others are crushed by far smaller things? For thousands of years, Buddhism has offered teachings that point toward an answer. And the heart of that answer is deceptively simple. What is truly meant for you will come at the right time, and what is not meant for you will eventually leave, no matter how tightly you hold on. I know how that sounds when you're in the middle of a hard season, when the job fell through, when the relationship ended, when the diagnosis came, or the money ran out, where the person you counted on walked away. In those moments, being told to trust can feel almost insulting. But stay with me, because these teachings aren't about pretending everything is fine. They're about something much deeper and much more practical, learning to stop fighting the current of your own life and discovering that the peace you've been chasing was never on the other side of your problems. It was always on the other side of your resistance to them. Through simple stories and parables, we're going to walk through 6 teachings together. We'll learn to release what doesn't belong to us and to receive with a calm heart what life is actually offering. We'll discover that detachment is not coldness or indifference, but a profound kind of freedom that finally allows you to live fully. And we'll talk about how to apply all of this in ordinary daily life, because wisdom you can't use is just decoration. Stay with me all the way to the end, because the final teaching is the one that most people skip, and it's the one that determines whether any of the others actually work. It has nothing to do with the world outside you. And before we begin, do me one small kindness. Give this video a like, because it helps these teachings reach someone else who may be silently going through something heavy right now. Subscribe so we can keep exploring this path together. And tell me down in the comments what city and state you're watching from and how old you are, because I read every single one. And it means a great deal to know who's here. Now, let's begin with the first teaching, the art of letting go. Once upon a time, a monk was given a delicate porcelain cup by his master. He treasured it deeply. He admired it, kept it near him always, and handled it with the greatest care. Then one day, the cup slipped, fell to the floor, and shattered into 1,000 pieces. The monk felt something collapse in his chest, and his master, watching calmly, said something the monk would carry for the rest of his life. That cup was already broken from the beginning. Sit with that for a moment, because it isn't cruelty, it's clarity. The master wasn't saying the cup didn't matter, he was saying that from the moment it was made. Its breaking was already written into its nature. Everything that begins, ends, everything that is formed, eventually comes apart. And the monk's suffering came not from the breaking, which was inevitable, but from believing it wouldn't happen to something he loved. This is what detachment actually means, and it's almost always misunderstood. Detachment is not indifference. It is not coldness, or giving up, or refusing to love. Detachment is simply the honest recognition that nothing in this world is permanent, including the things and people we love most. And how many times do we cling anyway? We cling to possessions. We cling to people. We cling to roles, to identities, to the version of our life we planned when we were 25. We hold on to relationships that stopped nourishing us years ago. We hold on to expectations that only produce frustration. We hold on to memories that keep us chained to a chapter that has already closed. We do this because we believe that letting go means losing. But here is the great reversal at the center of this teaching. Letting go is what sets you free. Buddhism teaches that suffering arises from attachment, from the grasping itself. We cling because we're searching for security in a world that is, by its very nature, always changing. But real security was never going to be found out there, in circumstances we can't control. It's found in our capacity to accept impermanence, to stop demanding that the river hold still. Think of it that way. A river doesn't cling to the water flowing through it. It doesn't panic as the water moves on. It simply follows its course, and in doing so, it remains a river. We can learn to move with life instead of bracing against every change. And when we do, something shifts. We stop experiencing every loss as a catastrophe and start moving through life with a lightness we'd forgotten was possible. And here's a question worth sitting with tonight. How many times has life taken something away from you only to give you something better later? Think back honestly. The relationship that ended and made room for the one that actually fit. The door that closed and pushed you toward work you love. In the moment, blinded by fear, you couldn't see it. You could only see what was being taken. But from where you stand now, you can see the whole shape of it. So please understand, practicing detachment does not mean giving up what you love. It means loving without possession, without desperate dependence. It means enjoying what you have with your eyes open, knowing that one day it may change, and knowing that when that day comes, you will still be standing. Detachment is the key that unlocks the next door, which is acceptance. Because once you learn to release, you must also learn to receive what life brings you without struggling against it. And that brings us to the second teaching. One day a disciple came to his master and said, "Master, I suffer because life is not the way I want it to be." The master smiled and answered, "You suffer because you resist what is. Life is not here to please you. It is here to teach you." Radical acceptance means seeing reality clearly, without filters, without the stories we layer on top of it. And notice, acceptance is not resignation. It is not giving up, and it is not pretending that what hurts doesn't hurt. It's simply refusing to waste your energy arguing with what has already happened. But why is this so hard for us? Because the mind is a storyteller, and it constantly writes a version of how things should be. Then it compares reality to that story and calls the gap between them suffering. We tell ourselves that if we just fight hard enough, argue long enough, worry thoroughly enough, reality will finally rearrange itself to match our script. But life doesn't work that way, and the fight itself is exhausting us. Imagine standing at the beach and seeing a large wave rolling toward you. You have choices. You can try to push against it. You can curse it. You can brace yourself and be knocked down. Or you can dive into it and let it pass over you. The wave is not going to disappear because you object to it. And this is exactly how it works with the situations we cannot control. Resisting doesn't stop the wave. It only guarantees that it hits you harder. Now let me be very clear about something important, because this teaching gets twisted. Accepting life as it is does not mean resigning yourself to what harms you. It does not mean tolerating mistreatment or staying in situations that damage you or abandoning your goals. It simply means recognizing what is actually true without denial and without dramatizing it. And here's the paradox. Only once you accept reality, clearly can you decide wisely what to do about it. You cannot navigate accurately from a map you refuse to look at. Think about an expert archer. He can calculate the trajectory of his arrow with precision, but there are always factors beyond his control. The wind, the humidity, a shift in the target. He can stand there frustrated, cursing the wind for existing, or he can adjust his aim, adapt, and shoot again. In life, so much is out of our hands. Acceptance is what frees us to focus our energy on the part that isn't. Many of us resist acceptance because it feels like surrender, like admitting defeat. But the opposite is true. Acceptance gives you power. It releases you from the weight of a pointless fight. It lets you set down what you cannot change, so your hands are finally free for what you can. And here's a small shift that changes everything, one you can use starting today. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" try asking, "What is this teaching me?" The first question spirals downward into helplessness. The second turns you toward something useful. It's the same situation, but one question makes you a victim and the other makes you a student. Acceptance also means accepting yourself, with your light and your shadows. And honestly, this is where most people's greatest battle is fought, not with the world, but with themselves, their mistakes, their imperfections, the decisions they'd give anything to undo. But punishing yourself has never yet transformed anyone. It's only when we accept ourselves that real change becomes possible. The monk with the broken cup understood that things were as they had to be, and in that understanding he found peace. And in that peace, something else is born, trust. Which brings us to the third teaching and my favorite story of them all. An old monk lived in a remote village. One day, a beautiful wild horse wandered into his garden and stayed. The villagers came to see it and said, "What wonderful luck! A horse like this is a great treasure." The monk answered calmly, "Luck or misfortune, who knows?" Soon after, the monk's son tried to tame the horse, was thrown from its back, and broke his leg badly. The villagers came again and said, "What terrible misfortune! Now your son cannot work." And the monk, with exactly the same serenity, replied, "Luck or misfortune, who knows?" Weeks later, war broke out, and soldiers came through the village drafting every young man they could find. Every one of them was taken, except the monk's son, who could not go because of his injury. The villagers returned and said, "What extraordinary luck you have." And the monk, unchanged, replied, "Luck or misfortune, who knows?" This story carries something genuinely powerful, and it's this: life unfolds far beyond our limited view of the present moment. We rush to label events as good or bad within minutes of them happening, never realizing that each event is a thread connected to something much larger that we cannot yet see. We are reading one sentence and confidently reviewing the entire book. How often has something that felt like a disaster eventually led you somewhere better? Maybe you lost a job and thought it was the end of everything, and that loss pushed you toward work that actually meant something. Maybe a relationship ended and you grieved for months, and later you understood it was the doorway to a life you couldn't have had otherwise. Life is patient and wise, and when we learn to trust its process, we stop suffering so violently over the parts we don't yet understand. The teachers say that the universe doesn't take anything from us without reason. What leaves, leaves because its cycle has completed. What arrives, arrives because we are finally ready to receive it. But understanding this requires patience and an open mind, especially in the moments when it's hardest to believe. There's another story worth knowing here. A man was walking through a garden when he saw a butterfly struggling desperately to break free from its cocoon. It looked painful. It looked like it was failing. So with the very best intentions, the man gently opened the cocoon to help. The butterfly emerged easily, but its wings were weak and shriveled, and it could never fly. What the man didn't know is that the struggle itself, the pressing against the walls of the cocoon, was exactly what forced fluid into the wings and made them strong. By removing the difficulty, he removed the development. How often do we do this to ourselves? We become desperate for relief. We want immediate answers, instant results, a shortcut past the hard part. But the process is the learning. You cannot open the cocoon before it's time. You cannot rush what is not yet ready, including yourself. Sometimes the struggle you're currently praying to escape is the very thing building the strength you'll need for what comes next. And notice, trusting life does not mean sitting still and doing nothing. That's a misunderstanding that keeps people passive and calls it spirituality. It means doing your part, fully, but without the anxiety. Like a farmer who plants his seeds, waters them, tends the soil, and protects the field, but who does not pull the plants up out of the ground to make them grow faster. He does everything within his power, and then he trusts the rhythm of the thing. Accepting uncertainty isn't easy, but it is genuinely liberating. It lets you live with less fear, less anxiety, and far more presence. Because in the end, what is meant for you will come, and what is not will go. And on this path of trust, there's a tool that helps us find clarity in the middle of the chaos, which brings us to the fourth teaching. In a monastery, a disciple came to his master, frustrated. "My mind is a whirlwind," he said. "I try to find peace, but the harder I try, the more restless I become." The master said nothing. He simply handed the disciple a glass of water with dirt at the bottom and told him to shake it. The disciple shook it until the water was completely brown and cloudy. Then the master said one word: "Wait." They sat together in silence, and slowly, without anyone doing anything at all, the dirt settled to the bottom and the water became clear. "This is the mind," the master explained. "If you allow it to be still, clarity comes on its own. That's the essence of meditation, and it corrects the biggest misunderstanding people have about it. Meditation is not about emptying your mind or forcing your thoughts to stop. It is not escape. It is the practice of observing without judgment, letting thoughts pass through without grabbing at them, and allowing the sediment of a busy life to settle so you can finally see clearly. We live surrounded by constant stimulation, notifications, news, noise, worry, opinions. Our minds are shaken all day long, every day. When we meditate, we simply stop shaking the glass. We give the mind permission to be still, and we listen for what actually matters underneath the noise. The benefits are well supported by research. Meditation is associated with reduced stress, better concentration, improved emotional regulation, and a healthier relationship with your own thoughts. But beyond any of that, meditation teaches you something no book can: impermanence, experienced directly. When you close your eyes and watch your breath, you notice that a thought appears and then disappears. An emotion arises and then fades. Nothing you observe stays, and slowly you begin to understand in your body rather than your intellect that nothing in life is permanent. Not the pain, not the sadness, not the anxiety. Everything flows. Many people insist they can't meditate because their mind won't stop. But the mind doesn't need to stop. That was never the goal. Meditation is learning to see your thoughts like clouds crossing the sky. They come, they change shape, they go. The sky itself is untouched. You are the sky, not the weather. Let me give you 3 simple practices you can actually use. The first is breath meditation, and it's the foundation. Find a quiet place. Close your eyes. Bring your attention to the sensation of air moving in and out of your nostrils. Don't try to control the breath, just observe it. When your mind wanders, and it absolutely will, gently bring it back. That gentle return, done 100 times, is the practice. There is no failing at this. The second is gratitude meditation. Take a few minutes each day to genuinely reflect on what you're thankful for, not as a list you recite, but as things you actually feel. This quietly retrains your attention away from what's missing and toward what's present. And over weeks, it changes the whole texture of your days. The third is letting go meditation, and it's powerful for emotional weight. If something is sitting heavy on you, imagine holding it in your open hands. Breathe deeply. And with each exhale, imagine releasing it, a little at a time, not forcing it, just loosening your grip. It sounds almost too simple, but people are often surprised by how much it moves. As you meditate regularly, you'll notice changes that are subtle at first and then unmistakable. You react less. Difficulties don't grip you as tightly. There's a little more space between what happens and how you respond. And that space is where freedom lives. This presence is exactly what allows us to release control, which brings us to the 5th teaching. One day, a disciple stood with his master beside a river. As they watched the water, the master said, "Look at how it moves. It doesn't resist. It adapts to every rock, every curve, every change in the path. It doesn't fight the current. It simply continues." We try to control everything: our relationships, our future, our health, what other people think of us, how our children turn out. We believe that if we plan carefully enough and worry thoroughly enough, we can guarantee good outcomes and prevent all pain. But life is a river, always moving, and clinging to what we cannot control is the surest recipe for suffering there is. Buddhism teaches that real peace comes when we learn to release. That doesn't mean we stop trying, and I want to be emphatic about that, because it's constantly misread. It means we accept that not everything is in our hands. We can do our very best, and we still can't control the outcome. We can love someone with everything we have, and we cannot make them stay. We can care for our health beautifully, and we cannot avoid illness forever. Doing our part and controlling the result are two entirely different things, and confusing them is the source of enormous, unnecessary pain. There's a story about a man who slipped over the edge of a cliff at night and caught hold of a branch. He hung there in the darkness, arms burning, terrified, clinging with everything he had, convinced that letting go meant certain death. He held on for hours, and when dawn finally came, he saw that solid ground was just a few feet below him the entire time. If he had let go, he would have landed safely and walked away. What kept him hanging in agony all night was not the height. It was the darkness and his fear of what he couldn't see. That is exactly how many of us live. We cling to jobs that drain the life out of us, to relationships that ended emotionally years ago, to expectations that only produce frustration, to an identity we outgrew a decade back. We're terrified to let go because we're certain we'll fall. But so often, letting go is precisely what saves us, and the ground was always closer than our fear allowed us to believe. So how do we actually learn to release control? First, by accepting that uncertainty is simply part of being alive. There are no absolute guarantees for anyone ever. The problem was never the uncertainty. The problem is our resistance to it. Instead of facing the future with dread, we can face it with curiosity. What might life bring me that I haven't imagined yet? Second, it helps to remember how often what looked like a problem turned out to be a doorway. People who lost jobs and found their real calling. Relationships that ended and made room for something truer. Everything is connected in ways we can't see from inside the moment. Third, practice acting without gripping the outcome. Do things because they're meaningful to you, not only because of what you expect to receive. Like a painter who paints without obsessing over whether it will sell. Like a child who plays without any thought of winning. When you act from that place, life becomes noticeably lighter. And meditation is essential here too, because it lets you observe your fears without being swept away by them. It creates the distance you need to see clearly what you can change and what you must release. Letting go of control doesn't mean leaving everything to chance. It means trusting that whatever comes, you will be able to meet it. And when we finally begin to flow instead of fight, something beautiful happens. Compassion appears, not only toward others, but toward ourselves. And that's the sixth teaching, the one I said most people skip. A monk was walking a quiet path when he came upon a man striking his own chest and weeping. "Master," the man said, "I have made so many mistakes. I have hurt people I love, and I cannot forgive myself." The monk answered gently, "If a bird breaks its own wing because it made a mistake while flying, how will it ever fly again?" Guilt is the stone that keeps you from moving forward. Compassion is the wind that helps you continue. Compassion is one of the great pillars of Buddhism, but here's what most people miss entirely. Compassion isn't only about being kind to others. It's about learning to be kind to yourself. And so many of us are ferocious with ourselves. We punish ourselves for old mistakes. We demand perfection. We speak to ourselves in a voice we would never, ever use with someone we loved. Stop and consider that honestly, would you say to your closest friend the things you routinely say to yourself? And what does all that harshness actually accomplish? Does it make you grow? The honest answer is no. Self-compassion is not an excuse to avoid responsibility or growth. It's the foundation that makes change possible without terror. A tree does not grow stronger by being struck. It grows stronger by being watered patiently over time. There's a practice called loving kindness meditation in which you repeat compassionate phrases, beginning with yourself before extending outward. It can start as simply as, "May I be well, may I be happy, may I live in peace." For many people, this feels deeply uncomfortable at first. Some find it almost impossible to wish happiness for themselves because somewhere underneath they believe they don't deserve it. But here is the truth. Only when we can hold ourselves with love do we have real love to offer anyone else. You cannot pour from a cup you keep smashing. Compassion also means understanding that every one of us is on a learning journey. Nobody arrives knowing how to live well. We all make mistakes, make poor decisions, and react in ways we later regret. But if we keep punishing ourselves for the past, we ensure we can never fully arrive in the present. Now, compassion does not mean accepting what harms you. If someone treats you badly, compassion doesn't require you to tolerate it. You can be compassionate and still protect yourself. The difference is that instead of responding with hatred, you respond with understanding, not because the other person has earned it, but because you deserve peace more than you deserve to be right. And that leads to another story. A man was walking a long road carrying a heavy sack of stones on his back. He was exhausted, staggering, but he would not put it down. A monk saw him and asked what he was carrying. "These stones," the man said, "are my grudges and my resentments." The monk replied simply, "Set them down. You don't need to carry them in order to continue your journey." This is how many people live for decades, holding on to anger, resentment, and old wounds, convinced that carrying the grudge is somehow punishing the person who hurt them. But that person is not carrying anything. You are. As one teacher put it, if you pick up a burning coal intending to throw it at someone, you are the one who gets burned first. Anger and hatred damage the one who holds them far more than the one they're aimed at. And to be clear, letting go of resentment does not mean forgetting what happened, and it doesn't mean saying what happened was acceptable. It means freeing yourself from a weight that only you are carrying. So how do we cultivate compassion when we've genuinely been hurt? 3 things. First, understand that people act from their level of awareness, and someone who wounds others is very often wounded themselves. That doesn't justify anything, it just helps you stop taking it so personally. Second, give yourself permission to heal. You are not required to carry the wound forever out of loyalty to your own pain. You're allowed to close the chapter. And third, remember that compassion is not weakness. It takes far more courage to forgive than to nurse anger, more strength to release than to cling to what's hurting you. So let's bring all 6 of these together, because ideas that stay ideas change nothing. One day a monk and his disciple were walking through the forest, and the disciple, anxious as always, asked, "Master, how long will it take me to reach enlightenment?" The master answered, "If you walk in a hurry, it will take much longer. If you walk with patience, it will come sooner than you think." That's the great secret. Transformation doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen from watching a video or understanding an idea intellectually. It happens by applying these things, day after ordinary day. Because there's no use knowing that attachment causes suffering if you still cling out of fear. There's no point understanding acceptance if you keep fighting everything life hands you. So here's how to actually live it. 6 simple practices. First, practice letting go. Not by giving up everything you love, but by learning to appreciate without possessing. When something good enters your life, receive it with gratitude, but without terror of losing it. When something leaves, let yourself feel the loss without clinging to what's already gone. And ask yourself one honest question about whatever you're holding. Am I holding this out of love or out of fear? The answer will usually tell you exactly what to do. Second, practice acceptance daily. Begin each morning by asking, what can I accept today? Maybe it's a difficult situation at work, a disagreement, or a flaw in yourself you've been at war with for years. This isn't surrender. It's clearing the fog so you can act with wisdom instead of flailing. Third, trust life. Whenever something doesn't go as planned, remember the monk and the horse. Resist the urge to immediately label it good or bad. Ask instead, what might this be teaching me? Over time, you'll see that almost everything eventually held meaning. Fourth, meditate daily and keep it small enough that you'll actually do it. 5 minutes of watching your breath is enough to begin. Don't expect instant results, but over weeks, you'll notice you react less and understand more. Fifth, release control. Do your best, then loosen your grip on the outcome, like an archer who releases the arrow and doesn't chase it through the air. When something goes sideways, instead of frustration, ask, how can I flow with this? Remember that the best things in life are rarely the things we planned. They tend to arrive when we're open enough to receive them. Sixth, bring compassion into everything. You don't need grand gestures. A small kindness, an encouraging word, a genuine smile can change someone's entire day. But most of all, be kind to yourself. Speak to yourself the way you'd speak to a dear friend who was struggling. And one honest, gentle word before we finish, because I care about you beyond this screen. These teachings are meant to bring you peace and perspective, not to replace real support when you need it. If what you're carrying right now feels heavier than you can bear, if the sadness won't lift or the darkness feels overwhelming, please reach out to someone, a person you trust, a counselor, a doctor. Asking for help is not a failure of your spiritual practice. In every tradition worth its name, it is one of the wisest and bravest things a person can do. So let me leave you with this. Life is a journey that never holds still. Don't expect to arrive at some perfect, permanent state of peace. It was never about arriving at a destination. It's about walking with awareness. Some days you'll forget every word of this and react with fear, attachment, or frustration. And that is completely okay. Learning was never a straight line. What matters is that you come back to these principles again and again, as many times as it takes. Because in the end, this is the promise at the heart of it all, and I want you to carry it with you. What is truly meant for you will find its way to you, and what is not meant for you will eventually release you. However tightly you're gripping it right now, your only real work is to loosen your hands enough to receive what's coming. If this video helped you today, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so we can keep exploring these life-changing teachings together. And I'd love to hear from you down in the comments. Which of these 6 teachings resonated most with you? And has there ever been a moment when life showed you clearly that everything unfolds in its own time? Share it, because your story might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Tell me what city and state you're watching from and how old you are too. I read every one. Take good care of yourself, walk gently, and I'll see you in the next video.